Okay. Okay. Consider a quantum coupler. And we're going to consider this quantum coupler on the surface of a vessel, the hull port for those within the civilized that want their own secure channels with those back home um, on Earth, right? And so this is just an imagination of what an atmospheric balloon or vessel just floating along in near deep space or something like that could be capable of, right? So the hull right there is naturally semi-transparent, where there's direct line of sight into the vessel. And what ends up happening is these field areas, uh, these channels could be or have been built up over time from the interoperability of the network with planet Earth. You know, signal sources driving routing of molecular properties within, in my mind, MX2 materials. And I'm just using an MX2 lattice as like the simplified condensed version of what could sense the effective density limits of a condensed system. And so using graphene and other means to hone in on timing the amount of refraction that occurs can help with verification of making sure that it got there as fast as possible or it maintained a connection and that no man in the middle got into the intercept layer where it's still just an itemized list of reference correlations. There's still that fundamental level where you have your own language. What would it be? Basically, treat a vocabulary term of where that exact thing that you were referring to is placed inside of an array that's moving in a continuous flow over time. So it's changing. You have the ability to allow that to change state, and so that makes for channeled film logic that nests. What's back to the hull though, right? Because we're thinking about how that's basically like a cheese grater of surface, and that can get slightly steered by the amount of energy available around it in the hull area. So you can either consider that a way of keeping the signal true to direct flow through, and it ends up being pockets or a window to go through a port. And then from the other side of that port, let's couple it to modern civilization where we use fiber optic lines where the fiber optic surface has to be very, very clean, super precise. There's limits on how that can, it makes a tremendous impact. So there's certifications on that surface and then also the clarity of the wire. Now, what we're talking about is how with, fiber optics, we already have the channel logic of security and SSL and using quantum hardening security layers that removes the factorial function or at least obfuscates it somehow. I'm not there yet. Uh, then it's fascinating that you still have those fallbacks of what you're used to for the modern couple of where that port, that hull, either just clears the field for a known network to go through. Because if these routers are, if the hull itself is a processor, a communications array, and that array is quantum coupled to a couple of different areas down on planet Earth, then those areas make an impact, an actual gravitational wave effect. If we're turning the tune up to, this has been true for a while, so this is, the coupling that we've gotten the quality of control over in our orchestra of electricity using Euler's equation and perceived mapping and reference points adequately. So there's still the inherent moving of systems, right? But what we do is we nullify that in the programming by knowing that these signals have to take factorial patterns. So we use interference and we use resonance to certify the communication by checksum. And so it's got to meet the requirement in order to pass the test. And so that ends up being a huge benefit, not only for the total amount of brightness, because you can then have that volumetric certainty that it all got through at the same time, that it wasn't just temporally just slowed down and then brought back into the circuitry. Those kinds of features can exist, but then I believe that they have different trace notes. That's that's another characteristic, though, that ends up getting smoothed out by the truing systems that are looking for the difference between noise brought in by the cosmos, some far off supernova that sends this trace route of gravitational wave, a thing that can be quantum corrected for, or at least, speed of light corrected for, where the system starts getting used to the signal localized, and so then it expects other signatures, and then it categorizes that, and so the rest of the system then has a functional call of like, oh, okay, well, we're expecting any noise that's from the cosmos to be reported. So you can have that light lag for a quantized strategy on how to make the entire unison system a rowing the right way throughout all the field logic, such that we retain the right amount of energy. So if the forefront of technology is in retaining as much molecular momentum and kinetical data, such that we have a total mass capability to brute force through any forefront, then that's the avenue that you would go towards, is getting that tidal wave, that data set ready, because then the amount of possibilities to counteract that is trivialized by the computational wherewithal of basically making processors that can absorb the energy front of the cosmos and have it in a holographically redundant projection throughout space that doesn't hurt to have. It's just mapping data, and this mapping data arrives to other places that enhance the overall picture of what's going on. And so that starts as maybe a sloppier mess, but over time it keeps truing, and between the sloppy and the true are these eddy riptides of functional ensembles of signal sets that are delineated to mean something real useful. And so that's why a no weather system inherently, that's a distributed tick for both GPS timing and not influencing the weather, because that's the key strategy right there, is having a directional energy matrix of what's going on through the human internet, whatever you want to call it, such that we can zero that as the scale that we're using to quantify what happens in the weather. Otherwise, you're steering. If you're steering the weather, then are you the problem or are you the solution when it comes to the insurance company qualifying you for whether or not you should continue to be funded? I don't know. I'm working on some of these problems too. I don't know what the right answer is. The second you put a person in the middle of a process and you're trying to write the logical rationale to how to defend against it, you realize there's a person in there. So okay, so why, I don't know, why not see the possibility of using the ramp of innovation to have, molecular systems, universal processors organizing and helping the surface of the planet gondola materials across it. Uh, so that's the hull to port accessibility layer. And imagining that at the end of all of those couples, those actual fiber channels that we're all used to on planet Earth, the end couples could have been ionized to that point using field strategy such that it was, prepared for the pattern going into it. And it could have been prepared for that by the field in slight corrections that were true to the GPS that helps float that vessel in the outer atmosphere. So all of those correlations help the entire set stay measurable because of the city. The oh, okay, you got like the arc effect of a frequency and how that might interact over a circuit. And so, how your circuits are laid out, it notices those kinds of waves, and the better those are modeled for or smoothed digitally, then you get new levels of insulation that we're not used to seeing because it becomes the surface itself. And so, when you're used to the material catalog at certain elevations, well, you got to realize that there's this much that we're used to, and then there's the superset that becomes possible by having energy retention in slowing down photonics so well that we're storing photonical energies in just zero relative velocity, uh, compartments. And the better that we keep those padded, then you start realizing that we're building those energy vessels, of gravitational wave energies, and that counter trace or that buoyancy vessel capability ends up going through all of the different step trace that we're used to in chemistry and electromagnetics, in being a useful feature for the vessel that we've now learned to automate to, you know, basically model after humans with blood and tissue to use even plants and roots as thoroughfares throughout various features of this because we're used to it and it feels good and it's a good combination of harmonies.